Hi guys, you know me, Catherine Brown, in this group. Glad for those of you who could join and also for those of you that will watch later. And this is my dear friend Carey Sue, and I'll let you introduce yourself and just tell them a little bit about what you do and try to extrapolate why I would invite you on this sales group.
Okay. Well, I'm happy. I'm thrilled. Of course, anytime Catherine wants to do something, I'm all about it. I kind of have a girl crush on her. She's pretty cool. And those of you in the group already know that. She's pretty smart and savvy and cool. So I'm happy to be here. So a little bit about what I do. I teach manners, etiquette, social skills, and professionalism. And I started working with kids, 5th through 8th grade and high school. And as the parents would come and chaperone their child's class, the parents would leave and go, "Wow, that was good. I learned something." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And then the after the years and more comments like that, I realized, what, everyone didn't have access to this training growing up. Maybe it wasn't important in their family, or maybe their parents didn't know. Maybe it wasn't modeled to them. And so from a business perspective, as the parents would say, "Wow, I learned something. You know what? Can you come talk to my staff, or can you come talk to my employees, or can I take training?" I realized that there's something to it.
It's easy for us, being a little bit older, I think, to pick on the younger generations. But because I actually was doing some training just yesterday, and my host is 65, and he said, "I hate the phone.
Really?
I hate using the phone for work." That's
Really?
unusual. Yeah,
That
that
is
was unusual. But I was telling Carey Sue before we started that it was actually my husband's idea. He said, "Catherine, isn't a lot of your sales training based on people doing multiple touches, not giving up too early, reaching out to people, and you kind of assume people will use the phone?" And I said, "It sure is." And he said, "But haven't you also told me that people don't like using the phone, especially millennials?" And I said, "I did say that." And he said, "Don't you think you need to talk about how to be better at using the phone?" I said, "That's a good idea." So I can't take any credit. We talked about how you're getting called. It originally started with the parents from your classes, but you're getting called more and more from companies. And they're asking for training about the telephone. Would you give me an example or two of what this looks like, kind of what the employees are struggling with, and just some stories around that to kind of put this in context?
So I think it usually doesn't start out with the phone call that says we have problems with the telephone. That usually kind of bubbles up in the needs assessment, if you will. And whenever you mention that the 65-year-old gentleman is having trouble,
He does not
I
use the
know
phone. He
that,
avoids
that's,
the phone.
that's actually shocking, because most of the time what I see is the younger generations who are used to texting and used to email. In business you don't text as much, but you can hide behind email. And then when they do have to make those phone calls, they're just truly uncomfortable. And whenever I do adult presentations, I say adult presentations versus the 5th graders, I really start out with the first impression component.
Okay.
And the research behind that.
Okay.
And because I think that is an important part of the phone call. So the first impressions research that I use came from UCLA, and there's a percentage, 55% of a first impression is visual. So there's a ton going on visually when you meet someone. 55%. So that's eye contact, that's smile, that's body language, that's hair and makeup, that's professional dress, that's mannerisms. I mean, that's 55%. Then 38% of that first impression is voice. How you use your voice. Are you confident? Are you nervous? If you're nervous, people can hear that. So if you don't like making phone calls and you're nervous, people can hear. People can tell. Are you too loud? Are you too quiet? Are you too fast? Are you too slow? Tone, intonation, all of that. That's 38%.
Okay.
So add that up.
I'm trying.
That's
I'm trying to think on the fly.
we're at 90,
What's left?
we're at 93%.
Okay.
7% is word choice. 7% is word choice. So in the world of business, if we're communicating electronically from a first impression perspective, you're losing 93% of that first impression image, and it's just word choice. So if you have the opportunity to pick up the phone, you're still not at 100%, but you have the voice, you have the tone, you have the excitement, you have all of that. So when I do talk to the adults who have that fear of the phone, I try to paint that picture of how important that vocal
Okay.
component is to it. And, you know, the whole telephonobia, or how people pronounce it differently, the fear of the phone, it's real. But I think that first impression perspective and just that relationship perspective of people want to hear your voice and people.
So let's
not
name
really-
some industries, because younger people who watch this are going to say, Carey Sue, Catherine, you're wrong. I actually text for business all the time. So let me clarify that I do text a lot
Yes.
for business.
Absolutely.
It tends to be with someone, I guess I'd put it in two categories. It tends to be once a relationship's established,
Yes.
even with a client. In a business-to-business setting, it'd be with a client. And then I do use it in my cache of, and by cache I mean CACHE, right? In my list of the ways that you would alternate trying to reach someone, but it is never my go-to first, because generationally, I'll just say, I mean, people in their 40s and up, I'm going to go on a limb and say something, I guess, and tell me if you disagree, but I think they don't expect to receive a text from someone they don't know.
Absolutely.
So I feel like I have to introduce myself, and for sure I can't go through as much of my value proposition or the script because it's texting, so you have to be shorter.
Right.
So I don't want to say you can't use it. There are businesses that are completely digital online, completely sold through Facebook, sold on Etsy, have a shopping cart on their website.
Absolutely.
They're a little bit different rules. I'm not discounting that. I'm primarily discussing a professional service, an expensive product, something that's primarily business to business, or I think even the parents in your group expect
Right.
some touch.
Right. Well, and I think a text is a little bit more of a personal. I think it's a little bit more of an intimate. I mean, I'm not going to text somebody from a first impression perspective unless that's the only mode that they've given me to communicate with them.
Okay.
Or that's the only way I have. I feel like a personal, I mean, like you said, that maybe it's a generational thing.
I think it's somewhat generational.
I almost feel like I need permission to text somebody.
I believe that in business to business sales, I think that email is expected and anticipated. The phone is still used widely.
Yes.
LinkedIn, InMail, then Facebook, Messenger, texting.
Yes.
Are kind of in the lower category. So
Absolutely.
you guys are free to disagree. That's why
No,
we're
I think
having.
that's a good
That's
point.
why we're having this
I
discussion.
think that's another conversation that I've had with people as far as the old school telephone rules with new modern technology.
That if it's a business call, we would restrict the hours in which we call.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And just socially, old school phone rules, you wouldn't call somebody's home before 9 o'clock in the morning and after 9 o'clock at night.
One of the things we want to be sure to do is we want to be sure to list, Carey Sue, help me as a follow-up to this. Let's list what are old school phone rules.
Okay.
Because we can't actually presume people know, and you probably have some I wouldn't think of. Okay, so let's take our first question. My friend Aracelli's asking, here's a
Okay.
question that interests me. I noticed in my teens a willingness to use speakerphone for all their calls, even when calling for a job interview, etc. Perhaps I am old school, but that does not feel professional to me. Do you feel this is changing? That's an awesome question.
That is
Araceli.
a good question.
Thanks. No, I don't like speakerphone either. I feel like I have to ask permission.
Yes, I always ask permission.
Talk about that.
Well,
What do you teach people?
And I teach them to ask permission, and the same thing with I think it's a professionalism and it's a respect. So whether that's and she said she works with teens, you know, they would say Miss Brown until you say, oh, please call me Catherine. I realize we have a lot to talk about. I'd like to take notes. Do you mind if I put you on speakerphone?
You would encourage her to encourage people to explain and ask.
Exactly.
Or ask permission.
Exactly.
When I was trained in sales originally many years ago, we talked about this in the context of corporate recruiting and in business to business sales. We talked about speakerphone. And the reason I was taught not to do that is that when you're in a complex sales cycle where there are many people involved, there was a worry or a thought that someone may have someone in listening that they don't tell you is participating in the conversation,
Right.
who's actually a silent observer. And so it was considered disrespectful or somehow even a little bit dishonest that you would use speaker without asking for permission, because the thing that was in question was the reason for the speakerphone.
That makes sense.
And that there was something that was considered, even though we can't see each other and we were missing that face-to-face advantage, there's something that was more intimate about having the phone close to you. And again, this is going to be with a landline,
Yes.
right? But the idea was that you were holding the person close to you and giving them your full attention. And if you were on speaker, you were distracted or perhaps had another person in the room who had not been introduced. And that was sneaky.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%.
Is that our landline ringing?
That is a landline ringing.
Yeah, the landline. That's funny. We gave ours up with this last move, so that's funny to me.
Well, we have to have it for our security and for the gate.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's fine. Okay. Okay, let me read you some stats. I think everybody will find this interesting. So I in 2 different Facebook groups, I did a poll. Some of you might have participated in this. It was in our ExtraBold group as well as another group I participated in. And the people who responded were mostly business owners, ages roughly in their 30s to 50s.
Okay.
Okay. And a few full-time dedicated salespeople where they're an employee of someone else, but mostly business owners. And they're selling their own products and services. And I had 3 categories about the phone. I said, number 1, I don't love using the phone, but I will use it as a part of my sales outreach because I have to. Number 2, I hate using the phone and I try to avoid using it if at all possible. And number 3, using the phone for selling is absolutely no problem for me. Answers. 13 people said, I feel like I have to and I don't like to.
There you go.
So they feel uncomfortable, which I think is really noticeable. And then the second, I hate the phone and I try to avoid using it if at all possible. That was the second most popular answer.
Yep.
With 9 answers. And only 4 people out of the 2 groups said that it's absolutely no problem. And the range of people was in their 30s to 50s.
There you go.
So one thing we'll do as a deliverable is we'll give a list of old phone rules that
Okay.
you believe still apply to sell.
Okay.
I think that'd be awesome
Yeah.
as a discussion and interaction for people because it's always good to compare notes. But how did these numbers strike you and what you're seeing with work you're doing?
Right. Well, and I think for me, something that I struggle with is I feel like I'm interrupting people with the phone. And I know that I've worked through that with training from you. But I wonder if that's what plays into those large percentages is they feel like they're interrupting someone.
Right. It's hard to know. It could be that. And you know what's so funny, guys? Like, I would say I would answer number 3. I'm making a little bit of a qualifier because I occasionally have hesitation. It's not that I never have hesitation, but for the most part, using the phone for selling is not a problem for me. I think it's a superior form, so I make myself do it. Sometimes I'm a little bit concerned about interrupting, so that's why I'm so big into setting discovery conversations where we have to preset them.
Yes.
I don't like to catch someone unawares, and I'll always ask if it's a good time. So
Yes.
that's one way to overcome that reluctance. A point I want to be sure to make, though, that I think matters is it's not just about, I made these questions about people's personal preference, but the thing is that in sales, you have to remember that the reason that we have dignity as business owners and full-time salespeople in the products and services that we bring to people is because we want to serve them. And so in that spirit of service, the question really ultimately is not what is most comfortable for you, it's what does your customer expect?
Yes. Absolutely.
And I would say, go so far to say, in love, in serving them, how do they expect to be reached?
Absolutely.
And if you are selling your products and services to people who are mid-30s and up, 40 and up, I don't know where you'd suggest we have the cutoff, I would say your default position should be that phone is, if not a preferred, is somewhat expected use
Yes.
for outreach.
Yes.
I believe the phone with an interactive conversation back and forth is the best way when companies sell things that have to be well qualified. You want to make sure
Absolutely.
you're talking to a decision maker. You want to make sure you understand their expectations. You want to make sure you want to keep talking to them because they're a good fit for you.
Absolutely.
Right? And sometimes they're not. A lot of times someone's been assigned to go research a service, a training, and they're not actually the decision maker. You can find that out pretty quickly on the phone.
Yes.
Whereas it's hard to find that out sometimes over email. They don't
Yes.
write and say that.
And that's something that I learned from you. I talked to somebody who I thought was the decision maker, and we had everything done, and then she came back and she wasn't the decision maker, and I'm like, if I would have known that, I could have gone to,
I would have done differently.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And instead of all that time, energy, and effort that ended up being for nothing.
Right, right. Sometimes we call it in sales, we call it column fodder. I love that you mentioned that. I think another thing that addresses our fear when we're going to be requesting meetings or doing selling on the phone, another thing that's really important to remember is that almost everyone has to say, I haven't been asked that before,
Yes.
or a great question. Now, because my firm is often representing different kinds of companies, when they're fairly new to us, we'll say, I'm new in this role, which as contract labor is true.
Yes.
I'm new in this role. I've not been asked that before. Can I do some research and call you back? And I really feel, guys, like the actual agreement to having someone get back in touch with you, the answer is an additional qualifier.
Yes.
If they want to know, I've literally had people say on the phone to me, oh, that's okay. So they don't want to know that bad.
Right.
Or they say it in a way that makes me think, I'm glad this happened because actually they're not that interested and they were just actually trying to throw me a curve.
Yes. Right.
Right? So if they really want to know the answer, they're eager to hear from you. It gives you the reason to call back, which
Yes.
then you have your talking points and your bullets and the things you want to know next that are moving the sale along. It's just, I say, I don't know. Let me think about that. I say that all the time.
I think that's
Maybe
perfect.
I say it too much, but I think it's honest. And if I'm asked something I've not been asked before on a client's behalf or about something that I am new to offering, then I feel a lot of liberty to say that, and I feel like that abates my fear.
Absolutely.
I really want to make sure we hit on the fact that we don't wing it. It's great to have some preparation and scripts.
I do sometimes.
We want to avoid winging it. I would recommend
Yes.
having some key points in front of
Yes.
you because it helps with nerves.
And again, that's something that I've learned from you, creating a topic map whenever I do, going back to the winging it, because then you get off the phone call and you're like, oh, I forgot to ask him about such and such. So when you have your notes and you do have that topic map and you do have things planned out, then you're not going to get off that phone call and go, oh, that was a really critical thing that I needed to ask, and now I'm going to have to call him back. Or I'm gonna have
Right.
to
Well,
email
what will
him.
happen is you won't cover everything.
Exactly.
But you will have gotten off the phone with your next steps, and then you look at your own notes and you're saying, okay, next time I have got to confirm that I understand whatever it is that's
Yes.
still outstanding.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thanks for those that were able to chime in. I know that people are busy working. Hopefully they're busy selling.
Yes.
And we happen to be recording this on a Friday, so let me remind you, Friday is the best day of the week to do your sales follow-up. Why is that? Because everyone's looking forward to the weekend. They want to start doing less difficult brain energy tasks. And when they see you on the caller ID or they see you on the email and they're not quite ready to hang up for the day and give up for the day, they will often say, they relent, basically. They'll say, this person's been chasing me a while, I'll go ahead and have this conversation. So I always encourage people to persevere through the end of the week. I've really had some of my best sales calls and best follow-ups and days of getting people to agree to schedule meetings by not giving up too soon.
That's good.
At the end of the
I
week.
always remember you saying that. And I'm
It
like,
really
that's-
works.
Yes, make that last phone call.
It really works. 1 to 3 on Friday. It's magical. If you could, I mean, we're tired too, right?
Yes.
But if you can make yourself do it, it really works.
Yes.
So thank you for being my guest.
Absolutely. This was
So-
so much fun.
So we'll put lots of links. I want people to know Carey Sue she comes in and does lunch. She'll do, a half day kind of event. If you have younger people in your family, she's got set classes. We'll be sure to link your website.
Thanks.
She has a number of things that are already set, and then for the right opportunity and to put together custom price and custom package, she even does some custom work. So
Absolutely.
if this is striking a chord with you and you'd like to use her, I can't recommend her enough.
Thanks.
And thanks for being my guest.
Absolutely. It was fun. Yay.
Bye-bye.